So what I want to share with you today is a few of the steps that you can take in extemporaneous speaking when you've kind of gotten over being a beginner, you've gone to a couple of tournaments, and you know how extemp goes, and you can make it through an extemp round, and this is chiefly aimed at people who've decided that they're tired of just entering extemp, they want to win extemp. So you might call this intermediate extemp. And so the first thing that I'm going to suggest to you that you should do if you want to get a lot better at extemp very rapidly is treat extemp the way you would treat bodybuilding, which is to say you need to give a whole lot of extemp speeches. So what you should do is you should find someone else who's also interested in getting better at extemp, or someone who's willing to work with you. Maybe they've competed in the past, and so they could be kind of, maybe you already have a coach picked out through a club or something like that, but the arrangement that you're going to make is that they are going to send you extemp topics pulled from the week's news, from recent news, on a regular basis. And so you're going to give a whole lot of extemp speeches. If you want, and if you have the time, you could even be giving an extemp speech every day, but at the very least it should be several times a week. What you want to do is you want to go through the complete process. Have a couple, make sure that you have to pick between them, then take your 30 minutes and prep fully, then deliver the speech, and what's really important, video the speech. If you can, then sit down with somebody else and get feedback. But even if nobody else is around, you can watch your own video, and you'll spot things that need to be fixed. Make notes. Be very aware of what you're doing that you want to correct. And then, after you've watched the video, get up and give the speech again. Video it again and see if you fixed it. If you do this, and if you do it regularly, especially if you can manage to do it every day, you will be amazed at how quickly you will improve. In particular, one of the things that you'll find develops very rapidly if you are doing it over and over again is that your ability to become less dependent on your notes and to use your memory more and more, that will grow with the kind of sustained practice and sustained building up of that ability that comes from doing it very regularly. Now, the one thing you want to be careful of, and this is why I sort of compare it to bodybuilding, is if you're giving too many extemporaneous speeches, it's very possible to burn out on it. If it gets to the point where it's feeling like it's a chore, to where you're losing your enjoyment of it, that's going to spoil a lot of things about your ability to be competitive in the activity. That's going to show up in your delivery. It's going to show up in your creativity when it comes to generating ideas during the speech writing phase. So don't let that happen. If doing it very, very, very often is getting to be too much, then scale back. Just do it a couple of times a week. But the amount of effort, the amount of regularity, frequency that you can invest in this is really going to make you improve a lot. Now, a second thing that you can do between tournaments that's going to help you is to do a lot of very broad reading. If you don't learn anything about your topic, if your topic is almost completely unfamiliar to you right up until the moment that you draw it, then you're at a competitive disadvantage. So one of the things you ought to do is pick a couple of things that you're going to read a couple of times a week, maybe even every day, and you're just going to read them broadly. The Washington Post is really good for United States news because it's got a lot of coverage of politics, and it varies from place to place, from tournament director to tournament director, but very often for U.S. topics, they'll deal with national politics. Sometimes regional, sometimes local, so you do want to keep up with what's going on in your state as well, or a state that you're going to travel to compete in a tournament. But something like reading through the politics section of the Washington Post is going to get you a pretty good background in those issues. For global issues, what I think I would do if I were you is I would go to the BBC's website, because the BBC does a pretty good job of having understandable coverage of events that are happening in hotspots around the world. You also might want to just every day pull up, maybe even a couple of times during the day, pull up Google News and just scan through some of the headlines until some of the names and some of the places start looking familiar. You also, as the season goes on, if you notice that there are topics that are coming up over and over again because they're in the news, and they're going to be in the news a lot, like this year, the mess in the financial services industry, the sort of financial crisis that triggered the recession that we're currently in the middle of. That's the kind of thing where it is worth your while between tournaments to go out and find a couple of the kind of overview, sort of special feature magazine articles or very long newspaper articles, and get some background, and then go and find some adults who may work in an industry where they can explain things to you. Go and find a banker. Go and find someone who works for an investment firm. Ask a lot of questions. Get to where you are kind of an expert on something like that, so anytime that is your question in an extemp round, you feel great and you feel very confident because, man, I could talk all day about this. I know not just enough to answer this question, but I know why these things are true. That's the kind of activity that, if you put some time into it, really, really pays off in the fluency of your explanations and your ability to kind of dig deeper in putting together an answer for your question in any given round. So those are the first two things. Give a lot of extemp speeches and do some broad reading to lay a foundation for what it is you're going to talk about in extemp rounds.